The emergency pod's warning systems blared as James Harrison plummeted through the atmosphere of an uncharted planet. His research vessel, the Horizon Seeker, had been torn apart by an unexpected quantum storm, leaving him with barely enough time to reach the escape pod. As a xenobiologist specializing in evolutionary adaptation, he dreamed of discovering new life forms, but not quite like this. The pod's heat shields glowed orange as it cut through layers of purple-tinted clouds. James gripped his restraints, watching as the external temperature readings climbed dangerously high. The pod's AI chirped warnings in an unnervingly calm voice, impact imminent. Brace for emergency landing. The ground rushed up to meet him, a vast expanse of silver-leafed forest that sparkled under twin suns. The pod's retro thrusters fired automatically, but the landing was still brutal. James felt his head snap forward, then everything went black. He awoke to the sound of something tapping against the pod's exterior. His vision swam as he tried to focus on the cracked display panel. Atmosphere, breathable. Temperature, survivable. Radiation levels, normal. At least he wouldn't die immediately upon stepping outside. The tapping became more insistent. James released his restraints with shaking hands and peered through the pod's small viewport. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. A tall, humanoid figure stood outside, studying the pod with obvious curiosity. But this was no human. The being's skin was a shimmering opalescent white that seemed to shift colors in the sunlight. Long, silver hair floated around their head as if suspended in water, despite the apparent lack of wind. But most striking were the eyes, large, almond-shaped, and filled with swirling patterns of gold and violet. The being was clearly female, dressed in what appeared to be some kind of crystalline armor that hugged her athletic frame. She carried no visible weapons, but her entire bearing suggested she was a warrior of some kind. James took a deep breath and hit the emergency release. The pod's door hissed open, releasing a cloud of steam. He stepped out carefully, hands raised in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Hello," he said, keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I come in peace." The alien warrior tilted her head, those mesmerizing eyes studying him with intense interest. Then, to his shock, she spoke in perfect English. "Your vessel fell from the stars," she said, her voice carrying an ethereal, musical quality. "You are not the first to crash here, but you are the first to survive." James lowered his hands slowly. "You speak my language?" "We speak all languages. It is a gift of our people." She took a step closer, moving with fluid grace. "I am Zara, shield-bearer of the Viridian Enclave. And you are far from home, star traveler." James Harrison, xenobiologist from Earth. He gestured to his ruined pod. "My research vessel was destroyed. I didn't exactly plan to visit your world." Zara's lips curved in what might have been amusement. "Few things of worth happen according to plan." She circled him slowly, her movements reminiscent of a predator assessing potential prey. "You are different from the others who have crashed here. Stronger. More aware." James turned to keep her in view, trying to ignore the way his pulse quickened under her scrutiny. "Others? What happened to them?" "They did not survive the joining." Zara stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could see faint patterns swirling beneath her skin like living tattoos. "But you might." "The joining?" James took a step back, his scientific curiosity warring with a sudden sense of caution. "What exactly does that mean?" Zara's expression became unreadable. "My people are dying, James Harrison. Our genetics grow weaker with each generation. We need fresh blood, new patterns in our evolutionary dance." Her eyes locked onto his. "We need you." Before James could process this declaration, his attention was drawn to movement in the silver forest. More figures emerged from between the trees, all female, all bearing the same otherworldly beauty as Zara, but their expressions were far less friendly. "The council must be informed, one of them called out in that same musical voice. He cannot be allowed to leave. James tensed, ready to run, but Zara moved between him and the others. He is under my protection, she declared. The old ways have failed us. Perhaps it is time for a new approach. The standoff crackled with tension as James realized his crash landing had just dropped him into the middle of what appeared to be an alien political dispute. And somehow, he had become a vital piece in a game he didn't yet understand. Human instinct told him to run. Scientific curiosity urged him to stay. But as he looked at Zara, standing proudly between him and her own people, he felt something else entirely, a pull he couldn't explain, drawing him toward this mysterious warrior and the secrets she held. The twin suns began to set, casting the silver forest in shades of gold and purple. Whatever happened next would change not only his life but potentially the future of an entire alien race. The question was, would it be for better or worse? The crystalline citadel of the Viridians rose before James like something from a fever dream. Towering spires of living crystal pulsed with internal light, their surfaces constantly shifting and flowing like liquid glass. Zara led him through corridors that seemed to sing with every footstep, while other Viridians watched from a distance, their swirling eyes filled with mixed emotions, hope, fear, and something darker. Your people built all this? James asked, his scientist's mind racing to understand the impossible architecture around him. We grew it, Zara corrected, placing her hand against a wall. The crystal responded to her touch, rippling outward like waves in a pond. Our cities are alive, as all things should be. But like us, they are beginning to fade. She led him into what appeared to be a medical chamber. Three-dimensional holograms floated in the air, displaying what James recognized as DNA sequences, but unlike anything he'd ever seen before. Our genetic structure is unique, Zara explained, manipulating the displays with graceful gestures. We adapt and evolve within a single lifetime, absorbing beneficial traits from compatible species. It made us strong, resilient. But now. She waved her hand, and the display showed a deteriorating sequence. We are running out of viable patterns. Our children are born weaker with each generation. Some cannot survive their first adaptation. James studied the genetic data with growing fascination. Your DNA isn't just breaking down, it's becoming too uniform. You've lost genetic diversity. He looked at her. But what makes you think humans are compatible? We're from entirely different worlds. Zara's eyes met his, those golden-violet swirls intensifying. Because you're still here. Any incompatible life form would have been rejected by our atmosphere within minutes. Instead, she stepped closer, raising her hand to his face but not quite touching him. You resonate with our world. With us. The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken possibility. James fought to maintain his scientific objectivity, but there was something about Zara that made it increasingly difficult to think clearly. A commotion outside broke the moment. The chamber door crystallized, becoming transparent, revealing a group of Viridian warriors led by a stern-faced elder. Unlike the others, her skin was almost translucent, her hair a cascade of platinum that seemed to capture and reflect every available light. Shield-bearer Zara, the elder's voice rang with authority. The council demands an explanation. You bring an alien into our sacred halls without permission. Zara straightened, her warriors bearing returning. High Elder Neria, I bring a solution. The human's genetic structure could be the key to our salvation. Or our final destruction. Neria glided into the chamber, her gaze fixing on James with the weight of centuries. Do you understand what she truly asks of you, Star Traveler? The joining is not merely a sharing of genetic material. It is a fusion of essence, of consciousness. Many have tried. All have failed. James felt a chill run down his spine. Failed how? Their minds shattered, Zara said softly. Their bodies rejected the adaptation. But you're different. I sensed it from the moment I found you. Enough. Neria's voice cracked like thunder. The council has decided. He will be taken to the analysis chamber. If his patterns are truly compatible, we will extract what we need. If not. She left the sentence unfinished. Zara moved protectively in front of James. The old ways are killing us, High Elder. Force and extraction have failed countless times. I propose something unprecedented, a willing joining, a true fusion of our peoples. The air in the chamber grew heavy with tension. James could feel the weight of history and desperation pressing in from all sides. But as he looked at Zara, saw the fierce determination in her otherworldly eyes, he made his decision. I volunteer, he said, his voice cutting through the tension. All eyes turned to him. But on one condition, I want to understand everything. No extraction, no force. We do this as equals or not at all. A murmur ran through the gathered Viridians. Neria's expression darkened, but there was a flicker of something like respect in her ancient eyes. You dare make demands? He dares speak truth, Zara countered. Perhaps that is exactly what we need. Neria studied them both for a long moment, her form seeming to shimmer with barely contained power. Finally, she nodded once, sharply. You have until the next convergence of the moons, 3 planetary cycles. If you have not achieved a successful joining by then, the Council's original decision will stand. She turned to leave, then paused. And Zara? Do not let your personal feelings cloud your judgment. The fate of our people matters more than any individual's heart. After they were alone, James turned to Zara. 3 cycles to achieve something that's never been done before. No pressure. To his surprise, she smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her entire being. The impossible merely takes a little longer, James Harrison. Her hand found his, her touch sending a current of energy through his body. Now, shall we begin? The first attempts at joining were explosive. James sat in a crystal healing chamber, watching his skin slowly fade from bright purple back to its normal tone while Zara paced nearby, her usual fluid grace disrupted by frustration. We're approaching this wrong, James said, flexing his fingers as sensation returned. We're trying to force a biological response, but your people's evolution isn't just biological, is it? It's tied to consciousness, to emotion. Zara stopped pacing, her silver hair swirling around her head like a living aurora. The ancient texts speak of this. The first joinings were not done in laboratories, but in moments of profound connection. She hesitated, then added softly, of profound love. The word hung between them, charged with possibility. Before either could speak further, the chamber door crystallized, admitting a younger Viridian. Her skin bore traces of blue beneath the opalescent white, marking her as barely past her first adaptation. Shield-bearer, she bowed to Zara, then turned suspicious eyes to James. The lower council requests your presence. There are concerns about your methods. Zara's expression hardened. Tell them I am occupied with the salvation of our species. They say that is precisely their concern. The young messenger shifted uncomfortably. There are whispers, shield-bearer. Some say you spend more time learning of the human's culture than pursuing the joining. Others say. She glanced at James. Others say your interest in him has become inappropriate for a warrior of your standing. James watched as Zara's skin flickered with suppressed emotion, patterns of light racing beneath the surface. He'd learned to read these signs over the past days. She was angry, but also afraid. Go, he said quietly. Politics won't just disappear because we want it to. Zara turned to him, her eyes swirling with conflicting colors. Come with me. Let them see what I see. The lower council chamber was a vast amphitheater of living crystal, each tier occupied by Viridians of varying ranks and adaptations. James felt their collective gaze like a physical weight as he followed Zara to the center floor. Shield-bearer Zara, a voice rang out from the highest tier. Explain your lack of progress. Zara stood proudly, her warriors bearing on full display. Progress cannot be measured in mere physical changes. We are learning, adapting our approach. You are becoming compromised, another council member interrupted. We see how you look at him, how you adopt his mannerisms. You even begin to use human expressions. Is that not proof that adaptation is possible? Zara challenged. I have learned more about humans through willing exchange than all our forced extractions combined. A ripple of disapproval ran through the chamber. An elder with streaks of gold in her skin leaned forward. You forget your purpose, shield bearer. You were chosen for your strength, your purity of focus. Instead, you waste time on cultural exchange. The joining cannot be forced, James spoke up, his voice carrying in the crystalline acoustics. Your own history proves this. The more you try to control it, the more likely it is to fail. The chamber erupted in overlapping voices, some outraged at his presumption, others questioning his words. Through it all, James felt Zara's presence beside him, solid and unwavering. Suddenly, the air grew heavy with power. High Elder Neria appeared on the highest tier, her form almost transparent in the chamber's light. Silence, she commanded, and the chamber obeyed. I have observed these experiments. While unconventional, they have produced more viable results than our traditional methods. She descended to the chamber floor, each step leaving traces of crystalline light. However, time grows short. The genetic degradation accelerates. Already, 3 newborns have failed their first adaptation this cycle. Zara stepped forward. Give us more time. We are close to understanding. You have become too close, Neria cut her off. Your judgment is clouded by emotion. Therefore, the council has decided. The human will be transferred to our primary research facility. The joining will proceed under proper scientific protocols. No. Zara's voice rang with authority. I invoked the right of protection. He remains under my guard. Neria's form solidified as she drew closer. You would challenge the council's authority? For an alien? For hope, Zara replied. For a chance at true understanding instead of mere survival. The tension in the chamber built until the crystal walls began to resonate. James felt energy coursing through his body, responding to the heightened emotions around him. Then, something unexpected happened. His skin began to glow. Every viridian in the chamber froze, watching as patterns of light, similar to their own but uniquely different, began to swirl beneath his human skin. Zara's eyes widened in wonder, and without hesitation, she took his hand. The connection was instant and overwhelming. Where their skin touched, the patterns merged and danced, creating new configurations never seen before. James felt Zara's consciousness brush against his, not forcing entry but offering partnership. Impossible, someone whispered. No, Neria said, her ancient eyes filled with something like hope. Inevitable. But before they could explore this breakthrough further, alarms began to sound throughout the citadel. The crystal walls pulsed with warning patterns, and a guard burst into the chamber. High Elder. We're under attack. The Shade faction has breached the outer defenses. The moment of triumph transformed instantly into crisis. James looked at Zara, seeing his own determination reflected in her swirling eyes. Whatever was coming, they would face it together, 2 species on the verge of something revolutionary, if they could survive long enough to see it through. The Shade faction struck with devastating precision. Black-skinned viridians, their bodies absorbing light instead of reflecting it, poured through breaches in the citadel's crystalline walls. James had never seen anything like them. Where most viridians shimmered with inner light, these warriors seemed to consume it, leaving trails of darkness in their wake. Genetic purists, Zara explained as she pulled him through a secret passage, her warriors' training evident in every movement. They believe salvation lies in isolation, in purging all external influences from our genetic line. They would rather see our species die pure than survive through adaptation. The passage led them to an ancient chamber deep within the citadel. Unlike the flowing architecture above, these walls were angular, carved with symbols that pulsed with their own inner light. The first chamber, Zara breathed, touching the symbols reverently. Where our ancestors first learned to adapt, to evolve. The Shade faction doesn't know of this place. An explosion rocked the citadel above them. Dust and crystal shards rained from the ceiling as James studied the ancient markings. His time with Zara had left him increasingly sensitive to Viridian energy patterns, and these symbols seemed to call to him. They're not just decorative, are they? He asked, tracing a pattern that looked like flowing DNA strands. These are instructions. Zara nodded, her eyes swirling with intense colors. The original joining protocols, before we tried to force the process through technology. Our ancestors understood that true evolution requires both parties to be willing, to be. She hesitated, then finished softly, to be in harmony. Their eyes met in the pulsing light of the ancient chamber. The connection they'd discovered in the council chamber flickered between them, stronger now, more defined. James could feel Zara's consciousness brush against his, no longer alien but beautifully familiar. Another explosion shook the chamber, closer this time. The sounds of battle echoed through the passages above. "They're looking for you," Zara said, her warrior's instincts on high alert. "The Shade faction must have spies in the council. They know about our breakthrough. Then let's give them something worth chasing." James placed his hand on the central symbol, feeling energy surge through his body. "These instructions, I think I understand them. The joining isn't supposed to be a one-way process. It's an exchange." Zara's eyes widened. "But that would mean. Your people don't just adapt other species," James finished. "You're meant to evolve together, each becoming something new while retaining what makes them unique." The chamber doors burst inward. A squad of Shade warriors flowed into the room like living darkness, led by a familiar face, the young messenger from the council, her blue-tinted skin now black as space. "The abomination must not be allowed to continue," she declared, raising a crystalline weapon. "Surrender the human, shield-bearer, and you may yet be purified." Zara moved with liquid grace, placing herself between James and the warriors. "You forget our history, young one. Our ancestors did not achieve greatness through fear, but through courage to embrace the unknown. Our ancestors were not faced with extinction." "No," James spoke up, keeping his hand on the ancient symbol. "They were faced with something far more dangerous, stagnation. The fear of change, of evolution itself." Energy continued to build in the chamber as he spoke, the ancient symbols glowing brighter, resonating with the connection between him and Zara. The Shade warriors shifted uneasily as patterns of light began to swirl across James's skin once more. "This is your last warning," the lead warrior raised her weapon. "Step away from the human." Instead, Zara stepped back, her hand finding James's. The moment they touched, the chamber erupted with light. Energy coursed through the ancient symbols, creating a web of luminescence that connected them all. James felt Zara's consciousness fully merge with his, not as an invasion but as a perfect synthesis. The Shade warriors cried out as their light-absorbing adaptations began to fail, their skin flickering between darkness and light. In that moment of confusion, High Elder Neria appeared in the chamber entrance, her ancient power filling the space. "Enough," her voice rang with authority. "Look upon them and see what you deny." Where James and Zara touched, their joined energy created patterns never before seen, neither human nor Viridian, but something gloriously new. Their merged consciousness showed them visions of possibility, a future where both species could evolve together, each growing stronger through willing partnership rather than forced adaptation. But even as this revelation unfolded, James felt a warning pulse through their connection. The power building between them was becoming unstable. The ancient chamber wasn't designed to contain this level of energy. They had started something that couldn't be stopped, only guided. Zara, he whispered, their minds still linked. I don't think we're going to be able to control this. Her response flowed through their connection like liquid starlight. Then perhaps it's time to stop trying to control and start trusting in evolution itself. The chamber's crystals began to sing with building power as the final phase of their joining approached, a moment that would either save two species or destroy everything they'd fought to achieve. The ancient chamber blazed with energy as two forms of consciousness, two forms of evolution, merged into something unprecedented. James and Zara stood at the center of a storm of light, their joined hands creating patterns that rippled through reality itself. The Shade Warriors fell back, shielding their eyes as their light-absorbing adaptations continued to fluctuate. High Elder Neria raised her hands, attempting to contain the surging power, but even her ancient abilities proved insufficient. The chamber cannot hold this level of energy, she warned, her form becoming increasingly transparent with effort. You must stop. We can't, James and Zara spoke in unison, their voices harmonizing in an otherworldly way. Through their merged consciousness, they understood what was happening. This wasn't just a joining of two individuals, it was the awakening of something their ancestors had always intended. The citadel's crystal walls began to resonate in response to the energy emanating from the chamber. Throughout the city, all fighting ceased as both sides felt the change beginning. The very genetic structure of every Viridian was responding to the breakthrough, ancestral memories awakening after millennia of dormancy. This was never about survival, Zara's thoughts flowed through their connection. It was about evolution itself. The next step. James understood. The Viridians hadn't been dying, they had been preparing for this moment, gathering genetic memories and adaptations across centuries, waiting for the right catalyst to trigger their species' next evolutionary leap. The chamber's symbols pulsed in sequence, each flash revealing new insights. The first Viridians hadn't just discovered how to adapt, they had engineered their entire species to be ready for this moment, a quantum leap in evolution that required a willing partner from the stars. Through their joined consciousness, James and Zara became aware of others. The Viridian collective consciousness stirred, awakening to new possibilities. Even the Shade faction warriors felt it, their genetic memory overriding their learned prejudices. The young messenger stepped forward, her skin now shifting between darkness and light. The ancient texts, we misunderstood them. The purity they spoke of wasn't about isolation. It was about intention, Neria finished, understanding dawning in her ancient eyes. Pure intent, pure connection, willing partners in evolution. The energy reached its peak. James felt his human DNA responding, not being overwritten but entering into a dance with Viridian genetics. Zara's consciousness twined with his, showing him possibilities that his human mind could barely comprehend. Together, they became the bridge. Through them, human adaptability merged with Viridian evolutionary potential. The change rippled outward, affecting every Viridian in the Citadel. Their rigid genetic structures loosened, becoming more flexible while retaining their unique abilities. When the light finally faded, the chamber was transformed. The ancient symbols had evolved, showing new patterns, a genetic roadmap for both species. James and Zara stood changed but whole, each bearing traces of the other's genetic gifts while remaining true to their original forms. James's skin now held a subtle iridescence, responding to his emotions with faint patterns of light. Zara's crystalline features had softened slightly, gaining human warmth while keeping their alien beauty. But the real changes were deeper, genetic, conscious, fundamental. The joining protocols, Neria examined the new symbols with wonder. They're complete now. A true partnership between species. The Shade Warriors knelt, their modified genetics now stabilized into a beautiful harmony of light and shadow. Their leader looked up at James and Zara with tears in her eyes. We sought to preserve our species by looking backward. You have saved us by showing us how to move forward. In the days that followed, the Citadel became a place of celebration and scientific discovery. The successful joining had unlocked new possibilities for both species. Human scientists were invited to study the breakthrough, leading to advances in genetic medicine that would benefit both worlds. But perhaps the most profound change was philosophical. The Viridians learned that evolution wasn't about dominance or purity, but about finding strength in diversity, in willing partnership. Humans discovered that their greatest asset wasn't their technology or their adaptability, but their capacity for connection. James and Zara stood on a crystal balcony overlooking the city, watching the twin suns set. Their joined hands created subtle patterns of light that danced between them, a visible symbol of two species' potential for growth and change. "Was this your plan all along?" James asked, feeling her amusement through their lingering connection. Crashland, a human scientist, and hope for the best. Zara laughed, the sound still musical but with a warmly human undertone. "I prefer to think the universe has its own wisdom. It brought together exactly what both our species needed." Below them, humans and Viridians worked together in the newly established Evolutionary Sciences Academy. The Citadel's crystals sang with new frequencies, celebrating the beginning of an unprecedented era of cooperation and discovery. "So," James smiled, pulling her closer. "What's the next step in our evolution?" Zara's eyes swirled with love and mischief. "That, my dear scientist, is something we'll discover together." High above, the stars sparkled with possibility, watching as two species took their first steps into a shared future, one where evolution wasn't a solitary journey but a dance of partnership, understanding, and love.